Welcome to the Comical Heathen, one man's wild and weird odyssey into the world of religious satire. I am that man, your host, Dr. Jerry Jaffe, and I'm writing a book about religious satire, so I started this podcast to share some interviews I was doing and share some of the things I was learning and thinking about. And if you're tuning into this episode, you'll notice that it's called Season 2, Episode 1, Part 2. And that's because while producing the first episode for this season, I found myself with an embarrassment of an abundance of riches. The theme for Episode 1 was going to be the complaints and the censorship from a RTE sketch at New Year's Eve by the Waterford Whispers News, and then covering some of the ideas of censorship, blasphemy laws. I was so lucky to be able to interview Peter Hinchliffe and Michael Nugent from Atheist Ireland. And then I invited my friend Sean Lynch to co-host with me. And there was just so much material, it kind of ballooned out of control. As I kept trying to make the episode more compact, I just kept cutting stuff out. And I just reached a point where I had to come up with a different strategy. And that strategy was to do a 2-part episode. So first of all, I should say, to get the full effect, if you haven't already listened to Part 1, please do, because that features the actual interview with Peter and Michael. And that's really the heart of the matter, really getting to talk to those two gentlemen about the activism around Atheist Ireland and the controversy around the Waterford Whispers news sketch. But the total package included me with Sean Lynch, comedian, headliner, television writer, debriefing the interview. And so this is Part 2, which is going to be primarily me and Sean talking about things that came up in the interview. I've edited it in such a way that this is a standalone episode, so if you didn't listen to Part 1, this will still be two comedians riffing about satire. But the full effect, you would listen to both together. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to segue into that material. So this is me, your host, throwing it to me and Sean from a couple weeks ago, discussing the Waterford Whispered news and other related issues. Thanks for listening. I'm now going to bring in my co-host, very good friend, touring headliner, formerly one of the co-creators of Celebrity Deathmatch and other writer for other television projects. Please welcome to the show, Sean Lynch.
What's
Sean,
happening, Jerry?
How you doing, buddy? Hey, thanks for doing this with us.
Always
How
a
you doing
pleasure.
today?
I'm hanging in there, man. No better way to spend a Sunday than chatting with a pal about silly stuff.
Is this a crazy world we live in? Yesterday you were attending a Zoom wedding. Now you're attending a Zoom satire podcast.
Yes, there wasn't a dry lens in the joint.
So, I was just going on about the Waterford Whispers thing. What do you think about the bit? The bit was like a fake newscast, parody newscast, Daily Show type of thing.
Oh, yeah.
The newscaster says, well, the latest person caught in the Me Too sexual harassment scandal was God for his forcing himself upon an immigrant woman and impregnating her, right?
Yeah. Why not? It's about time somebody took down Big G.
That's right.
Probably took a pot shot.
I suspect that in other parts of the world, I'm in Ohio right now. We're both U.S. comics. But in Ireland, with the Catholic Church rules, and it's a touchy subject. So
I'm sure that gets a tut, but then a wee bit of a laugh at the end.
Well, Archbishop Amen wrote a stern letter complaining. I don't know how anyone after Python could write a stern letter complaining anymore.
My God, did he write it with one of those giant plume pens?
He must have. That's all they use in the Catholic Church, isn't it? But then
Ink boy.
But then Irish television took the sketch out of the online version. So they actually did remove it after they got about 1,000 complaints. I know.
Who knew that many seniors watched the show?
I know we're both big fans of satire.
Yeah.
But satire in art in general is always on a crash course with politics.
Yeah.
It's like inevitable.
It's how they feed each other.
Yes. Well,
without Batman, there's no Joker.
How would we, two doofuses in America, even be talking about the Waterford Whispers if Archbishop Amen hadn't complained?
That's true.
Right? Like if he had just...
Best PR they could have had.
Yes. Think of how much less reach the bit would have had.
Oh, yeah.
If he had just grumbled it quietly at home.
Absolutely. Well, after a while, you start aiming for those people. I know that, when we were doing a celebrity deathmatch and whatnot, we'd be like, come on, Tipper Gore. Come on, Newt Gingrich.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you something, but I'm also going to tell all of our listeners at home. Sean's a good friend of mine, and I actually did a full interview with him in season 1 of this podcast. So if you want to hear more of Sean's thoughts about religion and satire, please listen to the whole thing. I don't want to go over the exact same thing, but you did work for MTV, Celebrity Deathmatch, plus some other projects as well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when you're making Celebrity Deathmatch, which was and still remains quite an edgy show.
Yeah, it still holds up a wee bit.
There must have been pressure from the suits not to do certain things.
Oh, yeah. You know, in most television shows that I've worked for, there's usually one guy in the room, and nobody ever talks about this, but I think it's interesting. Every network, Comedy Central, MTV, VH1, you name it, there's always one writer that's never really a writer that gets assigned to the producer and the other writer of the show. Let's say, for instance, you and I come in, we pitch a show about religious satire, right? We come out and say, okay, this sounds great. I'm going to give you X amount of dollars for a pilot. This is great. Okay, so Jerry, you're going to be hosting the show. This is your show. Sean, he's going to be your head writer on there. You got 2 other guys that you like. Okay, we're going to put them on. And this is Joe Schmidoika. He's one of our staff writers, and Joe is just going to make sure everything runs smoothly, and he's in your corner, and he's just your guy, and you guys are going to get along great. Now, what they don't say is Joe's job is to rat out any writing that's going to cause them problems later on. And his job is to also suggest really softball suggestions to sort of tamper down. What I started to realize about 5 or 6 years into my career is like, oh, that's like an antivirus for guys like me. That's literally, this guy said, the guy comes in, is like, I don't think we should really do a joke about the Bush daughters going for an abortion. It would be great. We should do a parody on Tom Brady going to play the Cowboys, but he wears a cowboy hat on the plane. How about let's do something like that? Doesn't that sound good? Let me just hitch up my, but that guy is a plant, and he will go and rat. Dave Chappelle actually once threw his rat out of a meeting, like physically ejected.
Really?
Like, you can't be in the meeting anymore. Because he realized that every time a sketch that he made would get problems with the network, it was this one woman who was assigned by the network to basically rat them out. But they're there, and their whole purpose is to weed out anything interesting or fun or controversial. But what's interesting to me is,
and yet there was still company standards, or at least
there was never censorship on the violence, but there was always censorship on the subtext. And if it fell into religion or race or whatnot, oh man, all of the censorship basically comes down to this is another thing that I didn't realize until I was in my cynical 40s, that I didn't realize.
Welcome. We welcome you.
9 times out of 10, the censorship.
You get to your tired 50s. That's what's next.
All right. Woohoo! All right, inflamed prostate. Let's go.
Realize.
I'm hitching that belt all the way up past my navel. Almost every time we'd be censored, it was because one of the sponsors, be it Coca-Cola or Zit Cream or whatever, a lot of the CEOs or some of the companies would have religious right leaders.
Right.
And they literally be like, we can't make fun of the Pope. They're gonna pull the toothpaste ad. It was never a moral standing. It was never. It was just.
Sure.
We don't want to fuck with our money, boys. Let's keep this toothless and forgettable.
Well, as everyone who's gone to graduate school in media studies knows, that is one of Chomsky's main points. Was that in a full-throated capitalistic society, you don't need government censorship, because the media outlets will censor themselves.
Oh yeah.
And it'll never be even like a law. Like Ireland had a blasphemy law until very recently.
Please tell me that Ireland had their own special blasphemy squad. Blasphemy squad. That's great. They all wear papal hats and drive around in Pope mobiles. There's one guy who's kind of the tough guy who wears sunglasses and a cigarette. The pretty boy.
They hear someone screaming, "Oh my God," and they kick in the door.
Jesus, that was a good bit of beef, Margaret.
Did you just compare our Lord to beef?
Blasphemy Squad, brought to you in Technicolor.
Just the faith, ma'am. Just the faith.
Just the words of the Lord, ma'am. There we go.
Well, I knew I had to get you on to talk about this because you do such a great Irish accent. So,
I've had plenty of practice. I grew up with it in my ears, so it ain't a tough impression.
I just jotted down some examples, both from the 20th century and from history of the intersection between art and censorship, something I talk about in my classes, of course. In the time when Shakespeare was writing, there was a master of revels that you had to submit your plays to before they would be allowed to be staged.
Really?
You couldn't do anything, that the Crown didn't approve of. And that included, I'm sure you might even remember, I know you were a theater major in college as well. So high school or college theater history class, you might remember that there's no Shakespeare play in which a rightful monarch is killed on stage, like murdered on stage.
Wow.
Because you were not allowed. Like Macbeth and Richard III are killed off stage.
Right. I was just thinking, I immediately went to Hamlet, but I was like, when you said rightful monarch, I was
right.
Like,
yeah, because Claudius had killed the rightful king.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. Well, so they had a clause about no mocking the monarch, or
well, no inciting, insurrection. They didn't want anything that would put the idea in people's heads that maybe we should kill the king, or this was Queen Elizabeth, to be literal. I'll tell you just a funny one because I know we'll have fun with this.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were reading Shakespeare in high school or college. You must have come across the word zounds.
Zounds, yes.
Here's your trivia question for the day. I'm the quiz master, Gold Star Classroom. Do you know what zounds means?
I always thought it was just a sort of Anglo-Saxon exclamation.
Well, it is. But what it is, it's like, instead of saying like, God damn it, a wasp might go, darn. So zounds is a softened short form of God's wounds. But God's wounds was considered a blasphemous thing. Like if you stubbed your toe and went, God's wounds. Like that was like swearing. Like
I would love to know at what point in England that was the hip yes. vernacular. God's wounds.
Again, I want to, if someone shouted that while orgasming.
Right? Just thinking, like someone stubbed their toe on a peasant or something.
So zounds is like the darn it version of that. So when you see it in print, what you should think, and I don't know, I don't have a time machine, but this is how I think of it, whether it's completely accurate or not, is on the printed version they turned in, or the written out version, they wrote in zounds because it was less offensive. But if you went to see the play, they probably said God's wounds live. That's my prediction.
Yeah, well, you know what, it's very similar to the John Ford movies of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, when they would have Gabby Hayes, instead of weaving a tapestry of profanity, you would say things like "Gol blurn it," that "Gol blurn." That's wow, that made up gobbledygook to cover up for the good stuff.
Oh, hey, that ringing sound, that telephone from the 40s.
Is it J. Edgar?
Yeah, I thought it might be J. Edgar, but it turned out it was another friend of mine, comedian out of Los Angeles, Ian Harris.
He's great.
He's fantastic, and he phoned me earlier this week because he wanted to get something off his chest. So here's a quick mini rant from my friend Ian Harris.
What's up, everybody? Ian Harris here. I want to talk about the minimum wage a little bit. This is an issue I've been arguing with somebody on my podcast, Critical in Thinking, with Ty Barnett and Ian Harris. Check it out. And this idea that the minimum wage is going to raise prices and raise costs and all. Stop. Okay. That's not how it works. First off, prices have already gone up. Have you noticed? I'm not sure if you've noticed, but rent is gone through the roof. Okay, rent, mortgages, houses. My house, we bought a house 18 years ago. It's quadrupled. Okay, I used to rent an apartment. I'm living in LA. I used to rent an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment for $750 a month in West Hollywood 20 years ago, right before we bought our house. Okay, that apartment is now about $2,000 to $3,000 a month. Gas back in 2000 was about $1.50 a gallon here. Now it's $3. That's double. Okay, rent more than double, houses more than double, food. If you eat fast food, you could have gone and got a Happy Meal or a Burger King Whopper deal or whatever the heck it is. Go to Taco Bell and 99 cents this and $3 that. Nowadays, $9. Okay, so the prices have already gone up. Meanwhile, the minimum wage has gone up 0. It's still $7.85? That's what it was in 2000. So you cannot tell me that raising the minimum wage is going to raise costs when costs are already being raised. And also, it's very simple. If you look at the CEOs of all these companies, the companies that we're talking about, it's always fast food. Well, the McDonald's hamburger is going to go up to $20. No, because no one would buy a McDonald's hamburger, first of all. Second of all, you know what? The CEOs of these companies are making the companies are making billions. CEOs are making tens and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. They could take a tiny little pay cut and wouldn't have to raise their prices on anything. They've shown this over and over and over. People need to get paid a livable wage. It is simple. So anyone who's, and I've heard someone say, well, now if you do that, those jobs are going to go away because they're going to make people have more education. If you want to work at McDonald's and get paid $15 an hour, they're going to get rid of the person who's there now and they're going to bring it. No, they don't. The job skills don't change. It's not all of a sudden like you used to have to flip burgers and put lettuce and tomato and then wrap it and hand it to somebody. Now you first need to design a schematic. Then you need to grow organic cattle or raise organic cattle, and then you need to butcher them and bring them in and grind them up, and you have to meet all the safety standards. And so you need a degree in order to come work at. No, the job isn't going to change. Okay, the same people are going to go for a job. And the other thing is this: I heard this one. A friend of mine said, "Well, I'm a nurse, and I only get paid $11 an hour." First off, move. I don't know where the hell you're getting paid $11 an hour to be a nurse. The person's probably a medical assistant who's lying, but that's, I have a friend of a friend who said, I get paid $11 an hour and I'm a nurse. So some McDonald's guy is going to get paid more than me? Well, no, because you'll also get a raise, dum-dum. That's how it works. The minimum wage means you go up. So you'll likely go to $15 an hour or 18 or 20. You'll go up. But guess what else? If you think that job is super easy and you're like, well, I get paid $15 an hour to be a nurse and he gets paid $15 an hour to flip burgers. This is ridiculous. I want to get paid $15. Well, then go quit your job and go flip burgers. Well, that job's beneath me. Then what are you complaining about? Right? It doesn't make any sense. You like your job? Cool. You're going to get paid more to do it. They like their job? Cool. They're going to get paid more to do it. If you want their job, go do their job. If you don't like their job, shut up and do your job. And guess what? Everyone gets paid more. That's how it works. And the more money that people are getting paid, the more money that's out in the economy, and then the more money we'll all make eventually. That's how these things work. So, again, a little bit of research, and you can look at the places that have already raised the minimum wage. There's places in Florida, and California, and Seattle, and it hasn't hurt jobs, and it's actually helped the economy. That's it for my rant. Thank you guys. By the way, follow me if you get a chance. Ian, I'm at Comediocre, Ian Harris. I've got a podcast, Critical and Thinking with Ty Barnett, and I've got a couple of TV specials on Amazon, my comedy specials, Amazon, Hulu, those sorts of things. Thanks for having me.
Sean, you were based in LA a lot. You ever cross paths with Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen him perform at some. I mean, he's a great comic. He's got a very original voice.
Yep.
He tends to do the hipper rooms. I tend to do the more commercial. Being an older fart, I tend to lean a little more towards Hollywood Boulevard. But really, what a talent, that kid.
Yeah. Oh, I love him. I've got both his comedy specials, actually, and I recommend both of them. I brought something I wanted to talk about, but I'm going to give you one first. This morning, when we were getting ready to record, you were sending me some of your favorite Christian albums.
Oh, yeah. Christian albums, those things are great, man.
Give us an example of one that you like.
Well, one of my personal favorites here, I'll pull this up. It's the Golden Eggs is the name of the band.
This is a real band. I want to emphasize this, right? This isn't.
It's a 3-woman, middle-aged, menopausal band of Midwestern housewives called the Golden Eggs, because why not? And their album is called "Laid by the Lord." And they are, as you can see, happily in a giant tree with 3 eggs, just waiting for the Lord. And I'm just a huge fan of outdated Christian albums. I'm also a huge fan. I can't find it right now, but I just because Google is amazing. One day I put in Christian ventriloquist acts of the 60s, and sure enough, 5 or 6 album covers pulled up. My personal favorite was an elderly couple with a young ventriloquist doll, which already puts like some really scary images in my head about like, I don't know, murdered child replacement or something. It's this elderly couple. You know, the wife has a beehive, the husband has mutton chops, both gray haired and like matching plaid suits, and then the ventriloquist doll. God, it was like, you know, it was like Fred Mumford and wife and Andy. And then the album is called "He Touched Me." That is the name of the album. Is "He Touched Me."
Yes.
And I love that how, like, in 1966 or whenever this album came out, they had no idea that they're setting this up. Or the one that I sent you today, the other one by Miss Lauren Fudge.
Lauren Fudge.
The Christian flautist. One of my personal favorites.
Oh, she can flout. She flouts like she's not a Christian.
She is a flouting whore, this gal right here. Her album is called "Fingering and Praying" with Lauren Fudge.
That sums up my entire high school.
Another handsome prairie woman.
Right. Fingering and praying. That was me in high school.
Davening my D-bag in high school.
We called it typing class. I think you and me and we like comedy that is 1 foot realistic.
Yes.
Should be rooted, if not in autobiography, at least in the real world, like things that are recognizable.
Yes.
But having said that, I think that's especially important for satire. Like,
absolutely.
If you're going to make fun of this religion or this politician, even if we're going to exaggerate, mock, or even make shit up, at least 1 foot should be like, this is the people, like, shining spotlights on hypocrisy.
Yeah. I mean, I always think the facts are the cake, and then you just frost it with silly and sprinkle with a little filth.
Sometimes the cake already starts out silly, but that's almost even scarier. Which brings us to something. The 12 people who listen to this podcast know that I don't do current events, but so this is more just like a historical topic or just a weird topic. A new member of Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, this is a person who was elected to Congress. We have to take them seriously. But she is such a conspiracy theory nut that mocking her is how we take her seriously. And people were all over this. So we're going to be like at the back of the line, Sean, but I still want to give this a go.
Well, I still like the idea that when she first got Marjorie Taylor Greene, when she first got her statements on, I just love the idea of Michelle Buchanan just tilting her tiara and being like, what? Nobody takes my crazy.
I imagine Dick Cheney at home going, I may be evil, but at least I'm not fucking stupid. And then he shoots
on a throne of skulls.
Yes. One of her conspiracy theories, and it strikes home to me, is that the California wildfires are caused by a Jewish space laser. And besides being
just to begin,
as our way into the topic, it's pseudo science, it's pseudo history, it's anti-climate change, but it's also just like a big badge of anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Blaming the Jews.
Right. No, blaming the space Jews.
Right. Well, yeah, the space Zionists with all their money controlling our lives. So it's
like, where's Mel Brooks when you need him?
Exactly.
Mel Brooks, cue the organ. We'll have Harvey Korman and Tim Conway come out and with like a giant dreidel with lasers on it out in space.
Yes. Well, Jews in Space was part of that movie.
Yes.
Yes, Jews.
That's right. You're right. I forgot that whole section.
Yeah.
There were Jews out in space.
Don't do more than 12 hours, please.
I just love the idea of her watching that movie and going, right.
It's a documentary.
Yeah, it's a documentary. First Planet of the Apes, now this.
And I mean, I am Jewish by culture. I want to take this seriously, but I also want to join Mel Brooks in the unrelenting mocking of anti-Semites everywhere. It's typical of a conservative. They're always pro Second Amendment until it's a minority with a gun.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Jews have a space laser. What about the Second Amendment? Come on.
You could pry this laser from our cold dead hands.
For my cold kosher hand. Smells like pastrami. And I don't think she realizes the implications of starting a religious space Cold War. Now every lunatic with a faith will want their own junk up, orbiting the Earth. Right. We'll have the great Hindi space cow squirting its milk at untouchable outcasts throughout the solar system.
Astral Vishnu. Yeah. Amazing. I want that.
The great Zen infinite space nothingness.
And of course, the Catholics will have their giant crucifix laser up there. I mean,
a Catholic space wafer. Wafer.
I mean, we could. You and me could pitch this to the Sci-Fi Network. I feel like we might have a pilot. Come on.
So anyone from the Sci-Fi Network, this is my pitch.
If you're if you're listening,
this is
as good as a copyright.
At gmail.com. The Shinto space natto, which would explain why deep space smells like badly fermented curds that no one would ever eat. Evangelical sauce.
We just lined up a whole season.
Yes, they're texting us right now.
Bad British sci-fi like Red Dwarf from like the 70s, where each week it's just another religion in its space.
Well, the whole Netflix business model is that they have to have new content constantly so people don't quit their service.
Right.
And so there's great shit on Netflix and there's mediocre shit on Netflix. Surely I could get a mediocre series on Netflix. Come on.
Absolutely. They're practically giving them away right now.
Call me, Netflix. Come on.
Get on the blower.
Did you know that there's a Mormon intergalactic coffee house? It's the only place they're allowed to get coffee, but none of them can get to it. So that's why they put it so high up in space.
Somebody needs to put that on the tablet.
Someone needed to stop me while I was writing this, Sean, but I got to tell you at least one more.
Now that I'm locked in this basement, nobody's stopping me.
Nobody's stopping me. The flying spaghetti monsters orbiting Russell's teapot.
Oh, that's your season finale.
Prove that they don't.
That's your Thanos.
Yes. Prove that they don't have an orbiting Russell's teapot.
I want to live in the broken Wally world that is this woman's head. What anti-Semitic cartoon is running through her head? Okay.
I will say my friend who did the Gold Star Classroom music is making new theme music for me.
Right on.
So I'm excited.
Rick and Donna and I love that theme song. I
put that song as an extra track on my CD.
Oh, that's great.
It's the reason to buy the CD. Like, the jokes are fine, but spend your $5 to get that song, man. You need that song in your life.
It is. It's so great. It's and Mark nailed it. It's like right out of Boogie Nights. Like, it just reminds me of something off the Boogie Nights.
Yep. Yep. It's got that kind of brown chicken, brown cow guitar feeling.
Yeah.
Hey, Sean, I wanted to ask you something that they brought up that you might have experienced as a comedian or a television writer, which is they were talking about how once the blasphemy laws are in the air, let alone they're on the books, there's a kind of chilling effect, like writers and producers self-censor because they know the trouble that it might cause them.
Well, I'd say 4 out of 5 do, and then there's always that one guy who gets real inspired by it. One guy gets
that guy lasts more than one season is the question.
Oh yeah, but it's true. I mean, some people get variants. Some people need it. Some writers need somebody that, like I said, there's always one executive that comes by at least once a week on any good, funny satire show, where there's an executive that comes by and gives like a dean speech from a bad fraternity movie, where he's like, "Look, if we're going to keep this show on the air, we got to keep our noses up and our chins firm and our we can't go calling Idi Amin dope, or we can't."
Well, I mean, an example of that right now is film companies, TV companies, basketball companies are really obsessed with China.
Oh yeah.
Something might offend the Chinese or not get past Chinese censors. So let me just ask you this. Do you think I asked them this, and I'm going to ask you this.
Mm.
Does satire, does comedy help? I mean, we're talking like social justice issues, politics, social controversies. Is comedy helpful in any way? You know,
I think it's
or are we just
necessary.
so-called preaching to the choir and the effect is minimal?
No, I like to think that there's a percentage of people who like good satire gets the wheels turning. It's the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down. And I think there is a certain amount of religious political satire that is sort of preaching to the choir. But I always consider it a personal victory, just as a comedian myself. Mm-hmm. If I can do some bits that are pro LGBT, and I'm able to get, say, some middle-aged good old boys from Alabama to have a laugh about it,
right?
Or some gun-toting Floridians to have a laugh about it, I consider that far more of a victory than slaying it at a San Francisco coffee shop where our agendas are completely in line. That's why I think satire is such a necessary tool. Right. Not only for enjoyment, but it's without satire, I feel like satire polices the dishonest.
So I teach theater and comedy classes at a college. Some young adults are already like totally into this world and want to do so much. Mm-hmm. But you get those gen ed classes where they're being made to take a class or they're not that interested in it. And I mention that because when politics comes up, some students will have almost an immediate reaction of, I just want entertainment, or art's not politics, or art shouldn't be political, or disinterest. And I just wanted to share with you and then the 12 people listening, what I tell my students at that point is whether or not you right now think that art has political potential, I'll tell you who does think it has political potential: governments. That's why governments have censorship laws. If North Korea wasn't afraid of artists, they wouldn't have all their artists locked up in concentration camps right now. Putin wasn't afraid of Pussy Riot. He wouldn't have had them arrested. He wouldn't have had the laws changed to make, which right now in Russia, it's illegal to make comments about religion that hurts anybody's feelings.
Good Lord.
And that's because of Pussy Riot. So governments wouldn't have censorship if they themselves weren't afraid of art.
Yeah.
Hey, this being the first episode of season 2, there is one side thing I wanted to go off on, and then we're going to wrap up. In early January of 2021, one of my favorite actors passed away. I know you'll know the name, Sean. The actor who played Chano on Barney Miller, Gregory Sierra, passed away. And I just wanted to give that a shout out because I was such a fan of his work. He was on other television shows as well.
He was also in a couple of John Carpenter films.
Yes, and he also was a stage actor. And I just want to say, me and Rick Adana have discussed this before. I think maybe Barney Miller might be the single greatest sitcom of all time.
One of the best. It was one of the pantheon of incredible sitcoms that came out during the sort of the Norman Lear golden era of television, 72 to say 77.
Yeah, I mean, it's open for debate, obviously, and there are other great shows, Dick Van Dyke shows.
Also, one of the best theme songs ever, besides your own.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, I thought the format of the show was perfect for comedy.
Yeah.
Because anyone could walk through that door at any time. It could be a college student with a bomb, and then an Amish guy who won't use the telephone, and then a guy who thinks he's a werewolf. Anybody could walk through the door.
Yep.
And it was also a common sitcom formula. You see this in movies sometimes too, I suppose, but in sitcoms, where the central character, which would be Barney Miller, is not that hilarious, but he's like the normal guy.
Right.
All the wackos and hilarious people and foibles rotate around.
And that was Hal Linden?
Yeah, Hal Linden. Who was hired basically right off of Broadway. I know he'd done some TV and minor films, but he was basically a Broadway actor. The showrunner of Barney Miller saw him on stage 2 years earlier, went backstage and said, "I'm going to put you in the next TV show that I make." And 2 years later, Hal Linden gets a phone call. "I'm making a TV show and I'm offering you the lead part."
That's fantastic. And he was great though. I think a lot of good sitcoms have that. I mean, I think it's better if the Fonzie or the Latka character is supporting and you have sort of so sometimes you need that sort of milquetoast likable.
Yeah, well, who's more milquetoast than Ron Howard in Happy Days?
Yeah.
He's just the kid going to school.
Jerry Seinfeld is the least interesting part of Seinfeld, but makes that show work.
I want to say, too, just about Barney Miller, a couple things. First of all, they would bring up social issues in abortion, domestic abuse, immigration, but then they would be debated. Like, I'm sure the show kind of leaned left, but it was not a hard left. It was a kind of center left.
It was a lot more fair and unbiased than, say, All in the Family.
Yeah, like the Wojo character was a veteran, and he would sometimes make like pro-military statements, but there'd be other characters who were like pacifists, and then they would debate. And one other thing, Barney Miller, as a cop, always said, slow down and get all the information. Like the cops were always hot-headed, right? And I think there's something like just sort of intellectual about that, like, rabbinical, like gather, don't rush to judgment. You don't have to arrest anybody yet.
Right. Listen, lead with love.
Yes. And then finally, because I started with Gregory Sierra, when I was a kid watching that show, Chano was the character I related to. I don't know why. He was funny for sure. I think he had a lot of the best lines in the first season or two, and that when he left the show after season 2, it might have actually like democratized some of the writing. But I
was always an Abe Vigoda fan myself.
Oh, absolutely. Abe Vigoda on the phone. His phone calls on that show maybe stole the show.
Well, I mean, I think that's how he got Fish.
Him just listening.
Yeah.
He had already done the first. He was only in Godfather 1. But he had already done The Godfather, and they wanted to cast him because he'd bring a little gravitas. Like he would seem like a real cop, and he'd seem a little older, and he had a serious movie credit. Yes. But Abe Vigoda for sure. I mean, the whole cast was a great ensemble. That could be another way to put it.
One of the best ensembles on television.
Yeah. Just to say, Gregory Sierra, some members of Barney Miller, that was an older show, have passed. Some, like Hal Linden, are still with us. Gregory Sierra, R.I.P. Just wanted to sneak that in there while I had the chance. Sean, by the time this comes out, I know you have just done a great benefit show. I hope that goes well. How about later March or in the spring? Anything you want to plug?
If you want to check out some of my films or some of my stuff on Amazon Prime, you've got my film Greenpoint Tavern is streaming on Amazon Prime, as well as my pilot Every Other Sunday. You can also catch me on Amazon Prime's Comics Watching Comics, season 4 through 7. And Amazon Prime, put Sean Lynch in the search engine and a bunch of stuff.
Sean Lynch, star of Amazon Prime.
I'll tell you, man, they're at the top of my list, man. They have been, the past 5 years, they have been good to me.
I'm glad to hear it. I will say your film has won some festivals, and Comics Watching Comics is a very popular show. If you've never watched it, check out an episode. It's a very interesting format where comics do watch comics. I do want to say for myself, next week will be episode 2 of season 2. My co-host will be Jesse Pimpinella, and my interview topic is Mike Kaplan.
Oh, Mike's great. Yeah.
Oh, what a great conversation. Again, Mike Kaplan was on Fugelsang's New Year's Eve show.
Nice.
And he went like kind of hard political on his bit. And I said, because I didn't know Mike, I said, I'm going to just email him. And he totally emailed me back. He was totally into it. We had a great conversation. And I just want to make sure people know that I'm going to do a live Q&A show April 11th. So please send in your questions or topics you'd like us to talk about. Our email again is comicalheathen@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, smoke signals, carrier pigeons, whatever you can. Send in your topics and whatnot. And I just want to make sure I thank everybody. So before we get off the air, I want to thank Peter and Michael from Atheist Ireland for letting me talk to them about the Waterford Whispers situation. I want to thank Ian Harris for calling in and bitching for a few minutes. My good friend Jeff Geddert has made the theme song for season 2.
And I'd like to thank the Galactic Rabbi Consulate for building that laser.
Yes, used purely for circumcision. That's why Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't need to worry about that.
That exact. It can actually sever a schmeckle from space.
Exactly. It's a giant space moil. So
activate the astromoil.
Who's holding the baby? Who's holding the baby? Hey, I want to thank Sean Lynch for coming and screwing around with me today. And thank you, the listeners. Follow, like, retweet, share with all your friends. And let me just say in closing, it might be your dogma, but it's my karma, and I'm all about spreading the love.